All right, we got Joe Rao here, Greco world team member, just generally interesting person in wrestling. Thanks to our buddy Brian Graham for hooking us up.
Yeah, what up, BG?
I'm just going to start off with kind of what we've been talking about already before we start recording, but what is the lifestyle like right now for really any like Olympic level athlete, but a wrestler specifically who's training for the Olympics without an immediate goal coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's making huge adjustments and focusing on what you can. I think that, us as wrestlers, I feel like we like to work out a lot. We like to wrestle a lot. We like to feel like we are somewhat in control of how our career is going to go. And we do that with like an extreme work ethic and, we can put in so many hours and you feel good about that every day. And like for me, it's harder to sleep when I can't work out, it's not normal. So right now we can work out at home. We can work on, sports psychology. You can be reading sports psych books and you can be kind of like, I'll meditate most days and, doing visualization stuff. And we could watch film. Like, I kind of had the U.S. coaches just send me everything they had. So I got just like hours and hours of film to watch. And, it's kind of working on what you can and kind of letting yourself relax, because there is nothing like that I can do right now to open everything up. So you got to know what I have control over and what I don't, and kind of work on what I can control. Right now, for certain athletes, we were saying there's some shuffling around. So for me personally, a big part of what I can control right now is figuring out where I'm going to, wrestle next, going into this Olympic year.
Yeah, that kind of like leads me to my next question. Like people are like, oh man, the Olympics got pushed back a year. That, that sucks because I wanted to watch them or whatever. But I think maybe what they don't think about is asking someone who's training for the Olympics to extend their career by a whole nother year, either from a physical health standpoint or even like a financial standpoint, is pretty difficult. So how do you do that? How do you push back your whole training cycle and your life 1 year? What's that like at this point with the Olympics getting pushed back?
Yeah, man. Well, luckily I don't have kids. Yeah, because I feel like there's tons of wrestlers out there who've been wrestling their whole life and they're telling their wife like, man, just one more year, just give me this year. And then it's like this happened. And they're like, babe, come on, like just one more year. You gotta let me see this through. And, it's hard having a dream like this. And it takes a lot from you to be successful on the high school level. It takes a lot from you to be successful on the college level. And then, the international level, there's a lot of like outside pressure because everybody's on living their lives. And, you could have this Olympic dream your whole life, but you also got other dreams. Like people want to start families. People, want to have actual financial security with, for a lot of us wrestlers, we don't even know what that feels like,
Yeah.
So you make a plan. You want to peak, and make that Olympic team and get a medal. And for a lot of us, that's going to give us kind of, we want to satisfy this huge, itch and desire to be successful at this level, or to feel like we gave it everything we had. And, postponing that is like making a lot of guys feel like they're not going to be able to achieve that. Like some guys, for financial reasons or like, for how old they're getting in their body, they're going to have to move on. Or some guys they're going to stay in wrestling and maybe they're not going to be as good as they were going to be this year. But for some people, it's going to be a good thing. There's plenty of wrestlers around the country that tore their ACL this year, and they're like, oh crap, man, this is pretty sweet. I said, I'm actually going to be able to try for the Olympics. I know a few people like that. So I think you got to take the good with the bad. For me, and I think for a lot of guys, like, we're just going to hunker down and wait for the wrestling to come back. And, so it sucks. Some people lost their jobs, or a lot of people lost their jobs. Some people lost their programs. And wrestlers have an unbelievable ability to adapt and make do with whatever they have, so for me, it's always remembering those times when I had nothing, and to where, like, through perseverance and hard work, it ended up paying off a year later, or 2 years later, 5 years later. And right now, you get used to having a good situation, and when that's ripped out from underneath you, it sucks. But you got to just remember why you do it, and the big picture.
We're gonna throw it back a little bit in your career. Jesse, wanted to ask you some questions about your home state and in your high school
Yeah.
career.
Yeah, so we got some kind of like Illinois guided questions for you, but I'll just start off with broad general question about Illinois. So, over the past few years, we've seen them really kind of rise to the top in the Greco and freestyle scene at like cadet and junior level, and they're pretty dominant, and but then you go beyond that and you look at the collegiate level, and you're not seeing as many of them at the collegiate level and at a high level there necessarily. You're seeing more of the other states like New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And so we're just kind of wondering, like, what are your thoughts on maybe why that's the case?
So I think that we all of a sudden started, kicking ass at Fargo because we had like a ton of guys wrestling on the senior level and then coming back and coaching and helping out. And then we had a great guy on freestyle and Greco at the head of the helm, like, pretty consistently. We had Marinetti and Born Matt and these guys that are huge freestyle presences, even now, coaching our young wrestlers every year. And then in Greco, we had Brian Medlin, who's now the head coach of the Illinois RTC, right. University of Illinois. And, he coaches Imar, and he's coaching, Zane and all those guys. And that's who all these kids come to the state and going to Fargo were getting coached by. So these are guys that we just kind of got lucky with having. And Coach Powell from Oak Park in Illinois, not Missouri Oak Park. I mean, right. For him, he made a lot of careers happen. Like, he was a big part of my career. So I think for a while we got really lucky, and there's just so much trickle down from that. Like, the more guys that we got coming through that are good at freestyle and Greco, the more guys are going to go to the senior level and then give back. And then it's just kind of a cycle. And like me, I kind of got into Greco at the right time. And so, but going on to college, I think that part of that is, like, a lot of our best guys are spoiled by such a good situation out here that when you get to college, you got to be very, like, intrinsically motivated. You got to kind of have that inside of you. And there's certain athletes who, they get out of the nest, and I don't know if that's what's going on, or we also, compared to other states, I feel like our kids go all over the place, Okay. Like, in Minnesota, like, something I noticed is that, like, most good wrestlers in Minnesota are expected to stay in Minnesota. Like, they're all pissed off that Mark Hall didn't go to the University of Minnesota, but that's like the expectation. Out here in Illinois, kids go to any university that, that they think is best. And I think that kids are kind of spread around. There are some kids that are doing well that we don't even, guys don't even think of as Illinois guys, but definitely Pennsylvania and the East Coast, I feel like they care about, and that's changing too. I mean, they have a huge freestyle presence, but they care more about folk style than Illinois does, probably. Like, we love folk style out here, but for whatever reason, the international styles, like, since I was in high school, became like the cool thing to do. Like, everybody wanted to do it. Okay. And not only was it like something we were successful at, for whatever reason, it was a popular thing to do. When I was coming up, to where, like, I see, like, in some states, some of these kids are dragging their feet, like, I got to wrestle Greco and freestyle. And there was kids, like, begging to do that here. And those guys that were so excited to wrestle Greco here. So there was just a really great culture for it. And maybe when they get away from that, it's hard for them to succeed. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So talk about that a little bit for yourself, because talk about your trajectory from Illinois. You wrestle Division III and you're national champ there. Well, first of all, what's the Division III wrestling atmosphere like, I guess, or what's the lifestyle like for
Yeah, because
D3 wrestling?
I think that a lot of kids don't understand that there are like different rules and regulations there. So we wanted to talk to you about that lifestyle a little bit more.
Yeah, man. I mean, first off, the big one is there's no scholarships. So that's a thing you got to figure out. You know, like me, I had a partial scholarship for grades, and I had to uphold a certain GPA. And there's a lot of things that but yeah, I had to work a job through a lot of that time, and I had make a lot of things work. But there's a lot of advantages that come with D3. For like one of the big differences from D1 is like your clock. You know, you could if you're 40 years old and you didn't use all your eligibility, you could wrestle in D3 for another year. You know, like in D1, there's a running clock, and once it's done, it's done. We kind of go by semesters there, and but you know, I was extremely disappointed going to a D3 school at first, because I was an 18-year-old kid who wanted to be a big shot, a D1 wrestler, and be an NCAA champ, and I thought that was all I could think about. You know, growing up, that was my big goal. You know, outside of the Olympics, I wanted to go D1, and it didn't happen, so I was pretty disappointed. But once I got there, I realized that I can train at a D1 level or Olympic level while I'm at D3 school. There's nobody telling me I got to be, a certain caliber wrestler. So I just kind of took it upon myself, and I had some great teammates and coaches out there to like get as good as I could. And it didn't matter if I was at, D3 or if I was NAIA or D2, I was showing up to any D1 tournament that would let me in, and I was showing up to any international tournament that would let me in, and I was scrapping against the best guys around the country. And I think that if people take that mindset, instead of like accepting like, oh, I'm just a D3 guy, then we have tons of examples of it on the senior level, guys that didn't go D1 that are medalists, like Tervel Delagnev's one. What was he, D2?
Yeah.
Carney.
Richard Perry was D2. There's guys that are Junko. There's, that go on to the UFC or internationally. And like, I think that as a kid, as a teenager, it's kind of D1 or bust in most of our heads. And there's a lot of great wrestling to be had in these smaller schools. And like, you never know when you're going to be someone like me who wasn't successful as fast as I wanted to be. And, you never know what could happen, if you keep wrestling. So thank God I went to that school and kept wrestling, because none of this stuff after would have happened,
Yeah. Me and him have talked about this before, but kids, part of the reason why I wanted to talk about that is because I think kids get caught up, kind of like you're saying, too much in like a name value or something, but really it's just about finding the right fit for you that's going to work out, and obviously yours led you to eventually being on a world team here. So how did you transition from college into Greco wrestling at the level that you did?
Yeah, it comes back to a lot of things I was talking about, and I was actually talking to a D3 women's volleyball team last night. But I was talking to them about this, that not going there as like I'm just a D3 athlete and living under whatever those expectations mean to you, and not comparing yourself to other people on your team or even other people in your conference or in the country, and kind of like demanding a lot out of yourself regardless of what level you're at, and kind of setting your own expectations and going to places that maybe other D3 guys aren't going to. And that's the reason why I was able to transition to the senior level and be successful. Like, I was showing up to Sunkist, and I was showing up to, NYC and the US Open. And a lot of my teammates, they wouldn't even go because they're like, we're going to get our asses kicked. And I was showing up, and I was like, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go there and get my ass kicked until I figure out how to score on these guys. And then, there was a lot of small moral victories while I was at that D3 school where it's like, hey, I just scored 2 points on this guy, and he was a D1 finalist. He kicked my ass, but I scored 2 points on him. Maybe next time I score 4 points on him. Maybe, 3 years from now, I'm tied with him. Maybe 4 years from now, I'm beating this guy. But, like, you never know if you tell yourself, like, hey, I'm not at these guys' level and I'm not going to sign up for the tournament. I just always had this mentality that like had this huge dream for whatever reason. Maybe I'm just crazy. And if it takes getting your ass beat, go get your ass beat, you know? So I was showing up to a lot of tournaments that I don't think guys would, because they sell themselves short. And man, you jump any level, there's going to be some ass whoopings. And when I did transfer over to Greco, you know, I joined Storm, and I joined Minnesota Storm because of their history of success in Greco, and because the number one guy at my weight was training there. And I didn't score a point on him for 3 years, you know, and it's like I said, more ass whoopings. And yeah, but I know how valuable that is. And I was going to the tournaments and I was winning, but I couldn't even score a point in the room. And it's uncomfortable, but you make decisions like that I kind of did throughout that D3 process. And that's why I was able to transfer over and I think be successful at the rate I was because I was actively seeking out opportunities that weren't normal to a D3 guy. Like I was sending emails and getting every coach I know to send emails about like, hey, can this guy come to this camp at the OTC? And, you know, just getting permission to go train at the OTC. And it's like, I had to pay for my ticket. I had to pay for my room and board. And I think I was doing things that some guys wouldn't be willing to do just because I knew that that's the level I want to wrestle at. And it's like, even if I'm not supposed to be there, maybe I'm going to show up until I am, you know?
Yeah. Graham kind of hit on this during when we talked to him too, is like, I think maybe people are like, oh man, these guys get to wrestle for a living. That's pretty sweet, but they don't fully understand the sacrifices and like, you know, the living situation. You guys necessarily, you know, you guys are struggling to get by, especially not even just Greco guys, but you know, people at that level. Graham specifically wanted me to have you mention, he said, tell about the couch you lived on for 9 months whenever you guys were
Yeah,
together.
man. Like, speaking of how it can get, man, not only was I getting my ass beat out in Minnesota, I was living on a couch in Graham's living room. You know, there was 3 people already living in this house, and all of them had girlfriends. So at some points, there was like, you know, there's 6 people plus me, and there's 1 bathroom. And I'm living on the couch, and you know, I just got mounds of clothes everywhere, and I got Tommy Boy suitcases, you know, just garbage bags filled with clothes all over the place. And you know, I kind of just like showed up and was like, hey, can I move in? And they're like, yeah. And I'm paying $150 a month so that I can sleep on these, you know, my teammates' couch. And there was a lot of points where I could barely afford, you know, food, and it was guys like Graham helping me out, you know, and Graham's a total cheap ass, you know, but he understand what it was, you know, what it was like, and he helped me out even with money at times, and kind of helping each other out until we found better situations. And you know, the more you win, the more money you make. And so I kind of had to wait for that to come around. And I almost turned around and went back home to Chicago before that even happened. And while I was living on that couch, I made the U.S. team. And, you know, it was a really crappy, hard year from a financial standpoint. And this kind of goes back to, like, you don't know when you're going to break through, but you kind of got to stay in the fight if you ever expect to. And, you know, I wasn't finding internships or finding job opportunities as I was transitioning from college, you know, to out of college. I was like, I'm just going to go where the wrestling is and make it happen. And I was lucky enough to kind of make the U.S. team, you know, through scraping by, but sometimes that's what it takes.
I was going to say, when you finally reached that, it's funny that you say you were still like living on a thread whenever you hit that breakthrough. So whenever you broke through, you're making national teams, you make the world team. I mean, what did that feel like at that point after you had honestly been, you know, basically doing whatever it takes to get to that point?
Yeah, man, I think it's like, it's what we do it for, right? And in a big way, it's just like it feels so great. But at the same time, whatever level you rise to, you're going to want the next best thing. So I think that we're all just bred that way to never be satisfied. So like I made the world team, I go world championships and I don't get a medal. Then it's like, that's the next thing, man. It's like, that's the next thing I need. And, you know, cause we want to be Olympic, you know, champs and medalists and, you know, world champs. So it was amazing because there's a lot that comes with making the team. Now all of a sudden you get travel paid for and you get paid monthly by USA Wrestling. And it's not a lot, but it's going to, you know, be a lot better than the situation you were in. And so you start getting free shoes, you know, wrestling shoes, and you start getting, you know, international travel paid for. And that's kind of life-changing, man. And, you know, it's kind of in this sport, you got to get to the winning and then you start getting paid and you get things thrown at you. So it's kind of like the rich get richer, you know, like once you win and you make your way onto the U.S. team, now all of a sudden all these resources are available to you, but you have to work to get to that point. And then for me, you know, a lot of guys work and they get to that point and they hang on and they're that world team member every year, like you know, like Spencer Mango. You know, we kind of saw him make the team, and when he got to that level, he never left. He was the guy every year until he retired. You know, his last year he got upset, but he's on the team I think like 8 or 9 times. For me, it's like I was the number 1 guy, then I was the number 4 guy, and then I was the number 1 guy, then I was the number 4 guy, and then I like had injuries. I broke my jaw, or I was the number 2 guy. And so like ever since I made that world team, it's like I dealt with a lot of injuries and crazy life things. And I haven't been as consistent as some of these other guys. So every time you're not on the team, you lose all your money, you know? So for me, it was never a stable thing. And I looked at every situation as if it could be pulled out from underneath me at any moment, because it could. You know, if you lose, you don't get paid, and that's just the reality of how we live on this level. You get one chance to make the team, and that's world team trials or Olympic trials. And if you don't make that team, if you don't make national team, you're not going to have any resources. So you're kind of starting from ground zero, you know, all over again.
I hadn't thought of this question before, but you said you broke your jaw, so it kind of made me think about it. Me and Jesse have talked before about how you watch some of these high-level matches, whether it's like freestyle or Greco, like on a video, and you're like, oh, yeah, this is a good match, whatever. But if you go to like Vegas or one of these tournaments where you're literally like standing there next to the mat and you're watching these dudes clash like up close, how violent, I guess you're going to say, or how much pressure there is there. So from someone who's been in those high-level Greco matches, just how physical are those matches? Because I think some people watch a Greco and they're like, oh, you know, it doesn't look like they're not scoring a lot or whatever. But when you watch it up close with like a fan's point of view, you're like, holy crap, these dudes are freaking fighting, basically.
Yeah, man, it's like 2 Rams going at it, man. They're just 2 guys headbutting each other, shouldering each other, elbowing each other, you know, just working for like just a little space, a little inch just to get an underhook or a 2-on-1. And like, because of you're not able to attack the legs, you know, from the guy actually wrestling, it's really challenging to get the scores. And so from like a spectator standpoint, it could look a little bit more boring, or like not as much is going on, but there's so many little nuances to it. And it's extremely physical, man. Like I can't tell you how many guys' whole game plan is just to headbutt the crap out of you the whole match. And it works. You know, people have won big matches through just headbutting, but it gets super physical, and it's you got to be really freaking tough. And for me, like I wrestle all styles, like to this day, and not all my Greco coaches like it, but I wrestle all styles. And for me, when I get to wrestle freestyle, it's so much nicer for me. Like I feel like I'm in a lot more control because I could take so many shots or whatever. And like a lot of times in Greco, you're just like using all your energy and all your physicality, and you don't even get to a score. It takes like I think a unique kind of individual to stick with that style of the sport, you know, because it's not as rewarding. Like you shoot, and you in freestyle and folk style, you shoot and you either score or you get scored on, and it's like high risk, high reward. And like a lot of these Greco matches, like you're just using everything you got just to get a damn underhook, you know.
Yeah,
and then you got to score on one of the best guys in the nation in the world with that underhook, and it's like, damn, man, it's hard coming from a folk style perspective sometimes, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I want people to appreciate when they watch a little bit more, just think, oh,
Yeah.
wow. Like if you watch it close, it is, there's a lot of heat there. So,
Yeah, man.
So you've traveled a lot. We'll ask you a couple more, then we'll wrap it up. You've traveled a lot, obviously. Do you have like a favorite place you've been, or like a most interesting place you've been on your travels?
Man, yeah, it's hard to pick one, but you know, there's a lot of really cool places that kind of culturally shock you. Like, you know, we go to a lot of Middle Eastern countries, and Eastern Europe countries are like a hotbed of wrestling, but like place like Mongolia was pretty sweet, you know. And it's like I didn't have the tournament I wanted, but I was like, after the tournament, I was like riding horses around these mountains and jumping on camels and stuff, you know, holding giant birds. And, you know, in the land of Genghis Khan, like that was a cool trip, even though like pretty depressed about not qualifying for the Olympics out there. But, you know, you kind of got to enjoy all these opportunities internationally because crap, man, you know, everybody I grew up with, they don't get to do this stuff. And you know, all of us are kind of demand a lot of ourselves, and we're not going to be happy if we don't win. But at the end of the day, like we got these moments, you know, whatever level you wrestled on, you got these moments you got to appreciate like that.
Yeah. All right. You're known as a funny guy. But you don't have to be funny here if you don't want. I know you do stand-up comedy and stuff. You can just tell whatever you want. But Jesse, wrapping up with our last question we always ask.
So we just always ask if there's an interesting wrestling story that's appropriate for public consumption that you've got. Could be weird, could be interesting, whatever.
Yeah, the appropriate thing kind of erases a lot of the story.
It throws a lot of people.
It does.
Especially, you know, I hang out with Graham, you know, there's not a lot of appropriate shit going on. But yeah, man, I think a lot of the crazy ones are like a lot of them have to do on this level with kind of the times we were already talking about, like living on a couch and how that kind of all kind of happened from going to the couch to the world team. I guess for me, every day I was like thinking about turning back home to Chicago, and I go out to Florida for world team trials, and I lose to Provisor. So I for national team, I get pinned in the first match against Courtney Myers. I wrestle back. I lose to Provisor to take third. So I'm not even on national team. So like I said, you got to make national team at least to get a pay bump, to get any pay. And so turn back around, and, you know, I don't know how I'm going to make ends meet. And, you know, I make the university team against Provisor. So we're wrestling each other at all these different events. And I go to world championships, and I'm in love with some girl, you know, back home in Chicago. And it's this girl I was obsessed with all through college, and she finally gave me a shot. But I go to Hungary to wrestle for university world championships, and I go 0-1, and I get like tuned up by this Polish dude. I don't know if he teched me, but it wasn't good. And it's crappy, man. And I'm like, we all go out after the tournament, and I'm like freaking crying, man. I'm like, I don't know if I could do this anymore, man. I don't know if I could be successful at this level. I'm not making any money, whatever. Get back home, and they announce that there's non-Olympic weights, you know, and they're gonna wrestle them off for the world team in Fargo. And you know, I'm a guy that cuts an extreme amount of weight to make. I think it was 85 at the time, or 84.
Right.
And I know I blow up to like 100 kilos, you know, and even if I'm working out. So I just kind of call my coach, and I'm like, I think I'm going to try for that 80 kilo spot, you know? And he's like, man, I'm not going to tell you to do it, because like in his head, I think he's like, yeah, you got to do it. Like if I die, like that's on his hands. So it's like, I'm not going to tell you to try, but I think you'd be a beast if you can make it. So like I absolutely kill myself. I got 10 days when I get back from University Worlds, and I'm feeling like a failure. I still don't know how I'm going to make enough money to survive. You know, I'm cutting down to 80, and Pat Smith and Alec Ortiz, we're making a sauna, and I'm running around Fargo, and it's blazing hot because, you know, it's Fargo time, like July. And at one point I just book it. I just start sprinting, and I'm getting so down to weight that I'm delirious that I like sneak into a hotel and I start eating their free apples in the lobby. Pat had to come and be like, what the hell are you doing, man? We got like a couple kilos to go, but yeah, man, I'm dying. I make it somehow, and I make that world team in front of Team Illinois, like we said, you know, which is amazing because I was is either I was going to coach them or I was going to go wrestle. So I made my first world team in front of Team Illinois, and guys like Kamal Bay were still in high school, so they were cheering me on, and it was a pretty crazy ride just to cut. You know, when I got home from Hungary, that girl said like she can't handle the travel. So I was living in Minnesota, traveling to Hungary, so she broke my heart, and I just channeled all that brokenheartedness into like, I'm going to lose it in the miles, and I'm going to run all this weight off. And I had like 30-something pounds to lose in 10 days. And I made the weight, and I made that team, man. And, yeah, that's kind of the story of how my life changed on the Greco level.
Awesome.
You know, just a simple lose 30 pounds, wrestle.
Right.
By the way, what people don't get about that story too is like everyone else pictures like making world teams, like all these different, like cool. You did it in Fargo. So that's the ultimate. That's the ultimate slam there. But
yeah, that's more my style though, I guess. You know?
that's true. All right, man, thanks for talking to us.
Thank
We appreciate it, and
Yeah, man.
hope you stay safe and everything goes good with the decisions you make next. All right, so
Thanks, man. Yeah, it was fun. Take it easy, guys.
I'll see you later, man.